Hi,
Hi, Julie. How
how
are
are
you?
you? I was going to say
Great.
Happy New Year, but I think we've actually spoken since the beginning of the year. I think.
We have indeed. Yeah.
I thought we could start with, if you don't mind, introducing yourself. I was kind of starting to do that, but I think it's better just for you to just share with us and our audience who you are and a bit about you and your world.
Yeah, happy to. I'm Andrew Schoelkopf, and I have a lot of roles in my life now. I'm a husband, father to two sons. I do some nonprofit philanthropic stuff. And professionally, I'm a business owner. As you know, Julie, when we started working together, it was half of one business. Now it's all of five businesses. So a lot has changed in the seven
Yeah.
years we've been working together and been dear friends. And um, I look forward to the conversation. Happy to help however I can.
Well, I kind of like to tee these conversations up, kind of more obvious question, which is getting things done. So what and when were you looking for, obviously, there's a reason you were kind of the GTD came into your world, whether you were looking for it or it found you. So I just always love to hear the story.
Yeah, I was looking more, I wasn't really looking for a book or a program or a coaching relationship. I was looking to some solutions to some problems, challenges I was having in my life, which is, and I go back to, we met, Julie, because I wrote a letter to David because I just was like,
Yeah.
oh,
I read
just
that
so
letter.
much
I
going
have
on.
that letter, by the way. I read it today. I've read it many
It's so
times and
funny.
it's so sweet and it's a beautiful letter.
Well, so I'll summarize it or synthesize it for the conversation today, which was basically it was a long list, and I'll say in retrospect a bit of a diatribe, which was like 18 bullet points of everything that I had recently thought and done and planned and executed, and I still felt totally overwhelmed and kind of rudderless a little bit professionally. I mean, I've always had for a long time, I've had the great benefit of being married to Grace, and we have two wonderful children, and that's a real blessing. So I haven't had second thoughts about any of that. But professionally, it would just felt like I was working so hard and so stressed, and I could see so clearly parts of what I wanted to accomplish professionally and personally, but I couldn't make I couldn't connect the breadcrumbs, right? I
Yeah.
couldn't have a picture in front of me. I couldn't visualize how I was going to get there. I knew where I wanted to go professionally and personally, but I just didn't know how to make that happen. And so I read a bunch of different things to become more productive because I thought that was what my challenge was. Like I just had too
Mm.
much work to do and not enough time. And that was a productivity issue. And then think in retrospect, that seems kind of quaint from everything I've learned from you and from our practice together. And I I say to others, not on the screen, like you're a partner in my business. Like I feel like our relationship and our partnership is about um, trust and mutual respect, and I've learned a tremendous amount from you. So my first step was to kind of read the books, which I did, and I read all of them, and then I started going back and rereading them. And I'd read an interesting book by a man named Scott Belsky that kind of turned me on to certain of these things. And then I started reading David's books and really learned a lot from that. I also learned a lot from reading other books, but GTD just seemed like a really interesting solution for me because it was really practical and
Mm.
it gave me a system, right, which I really use now. Um, Intuitively, I don't really think about the system. I just know when I process some things in my weekly review on Sunday, some go in the waste bin, some go in my physical outbox in my briefcase to go back to the office to be handed to others, some go other places, right? But I know where to put them.
Yeah.
And um, I think the book was an interesting part of what I learned, but it was um, and it was very reassuring, but I didn't really know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what led me led me to that diatribe to David, which kindly showed up in your personage.
Well, I think it's common, right? There's the information and this kind of intellectual engagement with this material that has this resonance for, certainly did for me and a lot of people. And then there's okay, now what? How do I take, also the book is really, it's the control and perspective in one thing, and so it's like, where do you start and all of that. I think for a lot of people, it's why we get those emails, why we get those letters, it's
And I'm sure there are many, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people feel that sense of clutter.
Yeah, well, when we talk about that, when we frame the GTD learning path, you have information, inspiration, installation, implementation, integration, that 5 I's that David is famous for talking about. Like, that information, inspiration, it's not going to get you into a practice. It's just going to get you excited. It's like, great, I'm going to read all these books about tennis, but like, I'm not going to like feel that like racket in my hand.
Yeah, and I think there's learning, of course. You need to understand how to set up your system and to learn the kind of functional parts of the practice. But one thing that I've learned is, it's a toolkit to help you build your own practice, basically,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
and
that's very
there's
well
a lot
said.
of stuff that has to be kind of fine-tuned. And I still update my practice every year. I give myself kind of 2 days off to go figure that out.
Yeah.
So it's like it evolves over time.
You kind of keep auditing, it sounds like.
I do indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, a lot of what you addressed in that letter was more about perspective than it was about control. It's like you have all these areas of focus and they're all bumping into each other and they're all kind of they're squeezing each other, right? But like a lot of people, we had to start at the ground and kind of really finesse and fine tune, that initial practice, which then led to, the refinement of it, which led to more work around your areas of focus and goals, vision, and purpose, and all of that. And I remember, so I have to say, I remember our initial conversation where, like, I'm curious what your thought process was, because what I remember, now granted, this was 7 years ago, so almost to the day. You were a little reluctant. I think I was curious, like in your own words, because I think a lot of people go through this, Andy. It's like, wow, like, first of all, I'm talking to, this nice human over here who is very, hopefully like warm and inviting, but like, I can't see it, like, she sounds like she can kind of see the path or the, what's possible, but I can't. So how do I commit to this thing, right? That is like a pretty big investment, A, and B, like, I have no like guarantee.
Well, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees. I think that, and I presume that everyone has their own personal reflection on what's going on when they're feeling stressed and cluttered and can't get out of their own way, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I think what had happened is I saw clearly, basically two things at the beginning. I saw clearly the longer horizons of where I wanted to end up, and I saw a complete and total overwhelm from 350 tasks that needed to be done.
Yeah.
And that felt quite urgent, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I could work in my nonprofit world and partner with somebody or some other people on a board or something, and I could see clearly a strategic plan, a vision of the mission and where we were headed. But in my own life, it was just like all of the levels, horizons of focus, it just kind of collapsed, right? And I think the most meaningful thing that we did together is just the core brain dump, getting everything down on paper and getting everything out of my head. And as soon as that was done, I mean, you'll remember we did a couple of coaching sessions, and suddenly I took a Sunday and wrote a 10-page personal strategic plan.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't really a plan. It was just, God, what an opportunity to enjoy myself so much more and to do so much more And I don't think I'd come to it a little stressed and frustrated, but I had no idea how much opportunity there was to me as a person that I was kind of leaving on the table by getting stuck at the ground level.
Well, and and you did the work, there's no magic bullet for this, right? And it
Yeah.
is hard. I remember those 350 tasks in Reich, and it's like, okay, Julie, now what? And those like full day long weekly reviews, like you did it. You hung in
Yeah.
there.
Well, I now have designed my own personal weekly review every January. It's like my
Yeah.
Christmas gift to myself, because if I just see that on paper, well designed and well laid out, I know, like, boy, I'm like really set for the year now. That's not to say stuff doesn't happen,
Yeah.
that gets in the way, but you know, in the years we've been working together, I've had kids come through high school and into college and struggle.
Yeah.
I've become a cancer survivor. I've lost my mother.
Yeah.
My business partner retired and I took ownership of the whole thing. I mean, there have been some enormous changes in my life.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I was thinking about we've been through a lot together.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it seems like, in a hot like a short, it just seems like a minute, and yet, it's been a lot. Yeah.
It's been a lot, right? So we've built 4 new business entities that are all profitable. We've gone from, you know, 2 business partners and 2 employees to one owner of 5 entities and 14 people really employed all the time. We've had the incredible opportunity to, do a lot of things that I just didn't imagine I would ever get to, let alone if they were possible. And
Yeah.
I think, from seeing my calendar, right? I make a weekly commitment I make a bunch of commitments to myself that I have a much easier time keeping to now.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of those is like, take 2 days off at the end of the year and declutter the brain and check on your 10-year progress and see where you are and be grateful about a whole lot of things that have happened that are positive, and be really curious about some things that have happened that we didn't expect or didn't want to happen.
Yeah.
But that I could never like keep appointments or keep a to-do list updated, let alone keep a rigorous commitment to myself every Sunday from 4 to 7 to do a weekly review, which now takes me about, I'm going to guess, when things are a little better on track, it takes me probably 20 minutes, half an hour. When things are really in change, it takes me probably an hour. But I've thrown a lot of things into that aren't part of a normal in the book weekly review, because I want to keep track of them in a different way. And the part that I read, I took certain things out of the books, like scan the horizon, right? To get out of your head, right? And I think
Yeah.
for me, the core bit of the practice, which was a total game changer, was first the setting up of the system, kind of
Mhm.
installing a system,
Yep.
because I suddenly found I wasn't losing stuff, I wasn't forgetting stuff, I wasn't missing stuff. It just all started working better almost overnight. And then it probably took me, you may remember better than I, Julie, but I'm going to guess it really took me 2 years, maybe a year or something, to get really good at doing a weekly review. And there can be frustrations along the way because you're learning a different muscle memory. But it made, working with you made almost immediate progress in my well-being and my health. And
I kind of wonder, and I guess I didn't really think about this until now, but at some point, like early on, like you did the mission. It was like the Schoelkopf family slash gallery mission. Like
yeah,
it was like, this is my life and this is what I want it to be about. And I wonder if that also, like you had the courage to do that in the midst of where things were still kind of like not on like perfectly solid ground. Like you were like, you jumped ahead, right? And like really created that like purpose and vision. And I wonder, that I'm sure on some level that was your kind of North Star for like doing the other parts of this that, were not easy, because it's like you had your why. It was so clear.
Yeah, but I think the clutter and the stress from being overwhelmed by the day to day, they really interrupt, or certainly they did for me, and I expect it does for a lot of other people. It really interrupts your ability to see who you are,
Mm,
right? And why you're doing what you're doing. And so if you'd invited me to speak with you 6 years ago, 7 years ago, or something like that, I would have said, introduce yourself. I would have said, well, I'm an art dealer.
mm,
Like, because that's my profession and that's kind of who I am. And I think by a week or two into working on it, it was about, well, God, the opening paragraph about this plan should be, I love my wife a lot, and it's a blessing to be married to her. And I have two incredible kids that I love and who, aren't going to be living at home forever. And it was just like, whoa.
yeah.
Um, and that's not because I didn't previously love my wife or my kids or my dogs or anything else. It's because there was just this opaque film in the way of like all this junk I had to get done.
Yeah.
So, the weekly review for me, and maybe you see different things from different people. I'm sure you do, but the weekly review for me is like, how can I get everything set that I need to be happy and healthy and organized and relaxed and aware? How can I like get that done in an hour or 30 minutes on Sunday? So, I can get downstairs and watch football with Grace or read a book or, whatever I want to do. And I think that's the real benefit. I think most people, well, I shouldn't speak for most people. I came to this thinking like, how am I going to build the business faster and make more money? I'm frustrated. I need to be more productive. And it turns out that was just what was in the way of me being more productive or aware or happy otherwise. I mean, it was just a smokescreen.
I just so appreciate that, because I have my own version of that. It's what's possible through this process.
Yeah.
It's the promise of GTD. It's like that clarity, not just who we are, but what we want our lives to look like, and what's possible.
Yeah.
So much is possible, but it's hard to access that with any sense of trust when you have when the 2 feet in front of you can't see it,
Yeah.
starting
Um,
there. And
I've always been a person that's felt a lot is possible. Like
mm,
we could do a lot
mm,
together as a family or as a team or as a group of people. Um, and I've never really struggled with getting bogged down with, oh, well, that's not possible. I'm not going to do it. But whether it's comfortable to get there and what else one has to give up if they're really too focused on that one thing, that's what I was really struggling with, right?
mm, mm,
And you know, here's a simple thing, like just acknowledging that, I stack in. We have a elaborate project plan, a lot of projects going on now, as you know, Julie, because we've
mm,
got multiple entities doing a lot of projects for clients and for ourselves. And um, my weekly review starts with my personal area of focus, which is first, because
mm.
I know if that's not in alignment, I'm not happy and comfortable with where we are there. Kind of the rest of it doesn't matter, and it's not going to function very well anyway. But I can scan now um, pretty quickly all of the areas of focus, and now all of a sudden we have 5 entities, and each of those has areas of focus and
Yeah,
clients and different. And um, it isn't getting more complex for me or harder. It's getting easier.
yeah.
And I still feel I have a kind of a lot to learn in that regard. I mean, there's still a whole lot of stuff I can do and want to do that's just becoming available to me now, just being revealed.
Well, and one of the things I've really witnessed in our time together is your ability to delegate. Like, do you remember how hard that was? Holy bananas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Now I
was one
have
of the
a,
things, it's like, Andy, like, you can't spend an hour and a half driving yourself in the city and an hour and a half driving yourself back every day. There's that capacity to really not just to delegate, but to have a team, right? That was like just like a stellar team that is like ready and always and available. You've really generated to me a wonderful model of what's possible for just for the kind of two-way communication and the agreements that are being made and the roles and responsibilities and how that gets trickled down. And now my experience of you, because my experience in the past was you had I don't know if it was a reluctance to delegate, or maybe you didn't have the appropriate people or whatever. They were valid reasons. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
but it's like how that turnaround, that shift that you've made has been absolutely phenomenal. Would you agree?
Well, definitely. And I think another awareness that's come from the work we've done together, Julie, is kind of what I'm pretty good at and what I'm not good at. And also kind of part of a lot of the work that we did in the beginning is, so I want this outcome.
Yeah.
One area of focus has got to be my learning and my reading and my research. I need to know how to do a lot of other things better.
Yeah.
And also led me to a better understanding. And you'll probably remember this session or this conversation we had, which was like, let's figure out what your time is worth and whether you're the right person to do that.
Yeah.
And so, there's a piece of that says, like, value yourself and your time better, because then you can make better decisions about what's critically important for you to do, or, this incredible opportunity to hire others and allow them to grow.
Yeah.
Right. I now have a business partner who's 27 years younger than me and has just unlimited promise and opportunity, and just wouldn't have occurred to me in the beginning. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And she's a whole lot better at some things than I am, by a yard arm. And I'm delighted. That just brings me a lot of joy. If you go back to when we were first working together, we had like 2,000 clients. Now it's more like 15,000.
Yeah.
So, it's all so different and more complex, but it's become easier.
Well, and you've created, you just had the vision and, and your line of sight, like from the beginning, and it took as long as it needed to take to get there, and you'll keep going. Now you have your next iteration of that you're working toward. And, it's like, how to generate, you have the perspective and how to keep things under control so that you can be in service of the perspective.
Well, I like to say we, because when I get out of whack, I know, oops, time to schedule a call with Julie, because it's not that you're a soothsayer or anything like that, Julie, but that's also a commitment to myself. Like, this is out of whack. That's something I need to work on.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that and find a solution for that.
And I'm only laughing. The reason I'm laughing is because that used to take like hours. And now by the time you text me and we schedule a call, you figured it out.
Well, sometimes mostly. Because, and I don't, it doesn't always have to be phone a friend to get on the phone with Julie, but that's one of my instincts now, is if it's out of whack, there's a solution to that. It's not
and
really
you
a
get your
problem.
notebook out and you start sketching it, and there, how you work well, and what you need to do, and you have basically eliminated, for the most part, the barriers to that. And because of that, you oftentimes, you're just solving things so quickly.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And so one of the most important things that I think I learned in the beginning of our working together is I felt always like a pretty smart guy and felt like I had some horsepower, right? But I just didn't have any torque. There was no way to gear it up. Mm-hmm. And the first phase of that for me was declutter. And that's why I always find so reassuring having an inbox, having an outbox, having a place, always having something available to me to record a thought. And And I still throw out about 90% of the good thoughts I think I have. Most of them aren't worth investing in or taking action in. But that vetting process of figuring out which ones have merit on Sunday when I do a weekly review, that's really powerful stuff, I think, because we learn together that I think very sequentially. And I get very frustrated if I know we want to go here and we're here. If I can't see the steps to get there, that's a clue to me or to us to say, well, that's one that needs natural planning model. And we use that a lot to unlock those ones that we think are really good ideas, but we don't know how to get to.
I want to say, Andy, is like what I've witnessed in you is this like going from sort of like feeling out of control, and like to like this complete command center of your GTD practice where it's like, it's so graceful.
The thing that's so important to me about that is when I have so much unplanned work, so much inbound work, so many inquiries now, that it's very easy to get off track, right? And you can get overwhelmed in a hurry. That's why I think having a process, and having the weekly review, which I honestly remember hearing, I think it was Meg or you on a podcast years ago saying that weekly review's got to be the cornerstone of your practice. It's because you lean into that and view it as an opportunity to help yourself and be well and be productive, and it suddenly unburdens you. It's really helpful that,
it's just the key, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I feel like I had all these list of questions and I was like so engaged in our conversation, I just didn't look at it, and I'm probably going to be later like regretting that I didn't ask you questions. But is there anything that else you want to just share?
No, I mean, personally, but others may be interested in understanding just how much gratitude I have to you for everything that you've taught me and everything you've done for me. It's been an incredible opportunity for me, and I really appreciate that.
It sure has been a joy and honor, and continues to be.
Well, we're learning together is how I see it.
I do.
And there's a lot more we need to learn together. But I look forward to it, Julie.
For more GTD resources, please visit gettingthingsdone.com and David Allen's YouTube channel. For more information, please email us at info@gtdfocus.com or visit our website gtdfocus.com/contact.